We are on board a Boeing 737 in the vicinity of Cairo Airport in Egypt. And we will do the VOR approach to runway 05 right. For that, we will use the VOR ILS 05 right chart. On the active frequency of Radio 1, we have tuned the VOR Charlie Victor Oscar in frequency 115.2, and the radial 135 is selected. The display of the VOR1 is selected in the EFIS and their respective DME. The screen is in CRT mode. The decision height minimums are established, as the chart, 710 feet, and we have checked that the altitude of the field is 382 feet. The meta for today at 11 and 03 Zulu informs us that the wind is calm, and there is basically unlimited visibility. The temperature is 70 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees Celsius. The dew point of 49 degrees Fahrenheit or 9 degrees Celsius. The QNH is 1016 millibars or 30.00 inches. The ignitions are in continuous. The checklist approach and the briefing of the approach have been made. The landing lights are on, and no smoking and seatbelt signs are also on. Cabin altitude is checked, and a QNH of 1016 millibars has been set. The approach speed for a weight of 73 tons is 142 knots with flap 25. The reference speed with gear down and flap 30 is 133 knots, and the go-around speed is 145 VGA knots. The ATC has authorized us the approach. In the EFIS, the VOR screen is selected. Right now, we are 10 miles from the VOR Charlie Victor Oscar inbound course 135. Our speed is 250 knots, and we fly at 5,000 feet. Looking at the MSA in the chart, we see that 3,500 feet is the minimum safe altitude when flying in this sector. We start the approach slowing to 220 knots and descending to 4,500 feet, which is the altitude at which we have to intercept the VOR Charlie Victor Oscar, so that we set 220 knots in the window speed and 4,500 feet in the altitude window. After that, we push level change. When the speed is 220 knots, we extend flap 1. The chart indicates that to intercept Charlie Victor Oscar, we have to turn to course 200. With the aim to capture the radial easily, we initiate the turn 2 miles before reaching Charlie Victor Oscar. To prepare the turn, we introduce in the window heading 200. Because VOR lock is activated, the aircraft continues flying the radial 135. We have reached 4,500 feet. Our speed has stabilized at 220 knots, and now we are at 2 miles from Charlie Victor Oscar. We begin the turn to 200, pressing heading select. Then we set the radial 200 on the course window and wait for capture, selecting again VOR lock. The plane begins to turn, and before intercepting 200 heading, the localizer is captured. In this leg, we will reduce the speed to 180 knots, putting 180 in the speed window. Also in this leg, we can see in the profile of the chart that we must descend to 2,500 feet. So we introduce 2,500 in the altitude window and push level change. When we are at 210 knots, we extend flap 2, and at 200 knots, we extend flap 5. When we intercept the mile 10, we have to make the next turn to the right that will let us capture the final approach radial 047. To capture the radial 047, we have to turn right to course 017. That is 30 degrees less than the desired course. To make the turn, we introduce into the window heading 017. We are stabilized at 180 knots and 2,500 feet, and we have reached mile 10. We push heading and introduce 047 in the course window. The plane begins to turn. We press again VOR lock and wait for the capture of 047 radial. If we look again at the profile of the chart, we notice that we have to maintain 2,500 feet to 5,8 miles of Charlie Victor Oscar. Once in 5,8 miles, we will begin the descent to minimum, that is 710 feet. During the descent, we have to adjust the altitudes given on this table. As we turn to prepare the descent, we set 700 feet in the altitude window. Then we arm spoilers and auto brakes in 2. We extend flap 10 and decrease the speed to 170 knots. The localizer has been captured. We are intercepting the 5,8 miles. We begin the descent to minimum using a rate of descent of 1,000 feet per minute. Extend flap 15. Gear down. And continue slowing to 160 knots. We head to the go-around heading 047 that matches with the runway heading and memorize the data. Ascend to 2,000 feet on runway heading, and once achieved, turn towards the VOR, continuing the climb to 3,500 feet, where we would enter in the holding. We control the rate of descent following the PAPI lights and regularly checking the table of altitudes. We're at mile 4. We check the altitude, 1,930 feet. Extend flap 25 and continue slowing to 142 knots. We're at mile 3. New check of altitude, 1,610 feet. We continue on glide slope. We extend flap 30 and decrease our speed to the reference plus 5 knots. That is 133 plus 5, 138 knots. We make the landing checklist. Auto brake on 2. Spoilers armed. Flap 30. Gear down. 3 greens. We are at 1,000 AGL and see the runway perfectly. Auto throttle and autopilot off, and we continue flying the aircraft manually. We are at minimums, 710 feet. There are no alarms on board. Our altitude and speed are correct. Over the runway, engines idle, and we flare. Once touchdown, spoilers and auto brakes are activated, and we apply reverse and the brakes. Welcome to Egypt.